Yo! Welcome back to another YouTube video. Today, let's talk about NBA coaches. Now, most of us fans just see coaches as pawns, and on great teams, they don't really do much. But in reality, the coach is the brain of the operations. Without the proper coach who can write up the play needed at the time, or run the proper lineups to get the win in a vital playoff game, most teams struggle. Unless you're the coach, however, and you run the show at all times, a great coach is key to maximizing player output and production on the floor. So, let's go over in this video the top 5 coaches of all time in NBA history. Now let's go over some honorable mentions. To start this off, we'll be talking about Red Auerbach, the coach of Bill Russell. The reason why he ranks not in the top 5 for me is because just like Bill Russell, you have to look at his accomplishments with a grain of salt, because the level of competition in the time when Bill Russell was playing was seen as much less as it was now. Because even then, players like J.J. Redick was saying, were playing with plumbers and janitors.
Does he ever shoot over 40% from the field in his
we
career?
understand that.
Did he
right.
overshoot? Did he ever shoot over 40%?
Probably 39, 40%. Different kind
Not
of game.
once.
It's
Not
fair.
once.
That's fair. You also had 29 assists in an NBA game.
Oh, well, you know, he was being guarded by plumbers and firemen.
So, in the 50s and 60s, his accomplishments for me are great, but are not as great as people who've done it in the modern era where the game was as big as it is today. Even then, he won multiple championships with Bill Russell, and his resume is one of the greatest resumes in coaching history. Yet, just like Bill Russell, a lot of us don't have him in the top 10 or top 5 because of his championships coming from the 50s and 60s. Now, our next honorable mention, John Kula. Now, you probably have never heard this name, but this guy used to coach back in the 40s and 50s and won 5 championships with the then Minneapolis Lakers. So, the Lakers were called Minneapolis back in the day, and he only won 5 championships. So, he's not as good as even Red, and he coached way back in time. Still, for a coach to win 5 championships, he must have been doing something right, but the level of competition is why he's an honorable mention here.
It's how do you get those 5 guys to play together? And John Kula handled that so beautifully.
Take him in the pivot, huh? Well, that was fast, man. Let's face it.
Well, you got to say it, Black.
I can't say nothing. I can't say nothing.
All right, let's settle down, fellas.
We had a great team. We played as a team. Johnny Kula would start the year off by saying, you're going to have to sacrifice for the team. And we tried to do that.
Now I want to go over the mistakes we've been making the past few games, so let's pay attention closely and go to work.
I never knew John to play favorites. He didn't say, George can do this, but you can't. He expected you to hustle and try every time you played. And the objective with him was the same with us, and that was to win.
And the curtain comes down on the NBA season with the jubilant Minneapolis Lakers celebrating 5 championships in 6 seasons.
He was a great coach and a great man and a great friend.
Finally, to round up the honorable mentions list, we are going with Lenny Wilkins. Now, he was the all-time leader in wins, but the problem with Lenny Wilkins was he only won 1 championship with the Sonics in the 1979 season in his entire tenure as a coach, which means his feat of being the all-time record leader is weak, because as a coach, when you coach for 35 years, you're obviously going to have that record, which is why him having that record, he's basically the stat pattern of coaching, because all his wins never equated to getting a championship, apart from 1 season. Which is why I did not put him in the top 5. He may be in your top 5, but not mine. Granted, he did go against some great teams in those 80s, 90s, and 2000s. He never really won enough to have him in my top 5. So now, let's go into the top 5 list.
Lenny is also taking time to reflect on all he's achieved.
I think that you got to take satisfaction in your record and what you've accomplished as a coach. I take satisfaction in the young players I've helped and watch them evolve into the talents that they are.
At number 5, we'll be going with Chuck Daly. Now, Chuck Daly was the coach of the iconic 1992 NBA Dream Team, and that's because he was the coach of the Bad Boy Pistons. Now, some people don't like them, but they did win 2 championships back-to-back in the pre-Jordan era against some tough teams like those Lakers back in the day. And it was no easy feat even now to go back-to-back in 2 seasons. which is why Chuck is one of the greatest coaches of all time. And adding on to the fact he coached the greatest team assembled, even if you guys think it's the 08 US team, that 1992 US team was out of this world. So he only coached for 14 years, which I find respectable compared to Lenny Wilkins, who would just never stop coaching. And I also feel like without him, that whole bad boy Pistons aura as a team would not exist. And I know many people probably have not heard of the name, but for me, Chuck Daly is the 5th best coach in NBA history.
Just one of the most incredible shots you'll ever see in a pressure situation.
1 and 2, split. Joe split hard, 2 split hard, 5. Oh, now 1 and deep. Direct pass to 5. Got it? They got a foul to give. Catch it and go for the shot. Got it?
Picked up by Isaiah. Isaiah long pass to Sally. Maybe too long. Sally saves it from going out to Dumars. Oh, baby! That's the play of the night.
Got to get stopped. Everybody's got a rebound. Stay solid. Rebound. Keep working. Listen, here's what we want. Listen, get in here.
Running down, Levier finds the It's the 4 seconds to play.
The Pistons are winners and still champions of the world. The Pistons repeat. I'm so happy because we worked so hard, and I wanted this one more than any of the last 3 trips. I don't know why, just because I love it. These guys have worked so hard to do it.
The 4th greatest coach in NBA history belongs to Steve Kerr. Now the problem with Steve Kerr is that many people don't think that Kerr would not be as great without the Warriors. But in reality, as soon as Kerr stepped into the boot is when the Warriors started winning championships. He's not only been a proven winner, but he's made great use of the talent around him and unlocked the great Curry we see today. Because before Steve Kerr, Curry was on the rise, but he never had those MVP seasons we've seen multiple times. The thing that makes Steve Kerr scary on this list is because he's already won 4 championships in the span of 8 years. So if Kerr can win a few more championships, they'll probably end up as the 3rd or 2nd greatest coach of all time. But for now, he'll be the 4th greatest coach on my list. Kerr was obviously blessed with one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history, but all great coaches on this list have had great teams. Otherwise, they won't be considered the greatest coach of all time if you think about it. So people who like to discredit Kerr can do the same for the rest of the coaches on this list, because I really don't care. Steve Kerr has been the brains that kept this Warriors team together, and which is why I rank him 4th all time, and one day he might end up as one of the top 3 coaches of all time.
The players, management, front office, and the coaching staff.
The Warriors started the season off strong with a 24-0 record.
But now, on to number 3 on the list. We go on to Pat Riley, the Messiah. We really do forget how Pat Riley was a great coach during his tenure as a coach, because now he is the lead of operations and a GM for the Heat. But in reality, he was a man who in the 80s won championships and won a championship in the 2000s, which shows his ability to adapt with the tests of time. And Pat Riley is one of the greatest coaches to have ever graced the court, even if we do tend to forget. His championships consist of the great 80s Lakers teams where he won a couple, and he won one more in the 05-06 season with that great Miami team with Shaq and Wade. In total, he would coach for 24 years in the NBA until he got the GM job for the Miami Heat, and ever since he's been a great GM, because without him, that big 3 in Miami would have never happened. That's why I rank him as the 3rd greatest coach in NBA history.
Move forward. With his custom-tailored suits and unruffled demeanor, Riley is a man who combines style and control. He takes a philosophical approach to basketball.
There really is a thin line between, success and failure. And we have miniature successes and failures every day. Winning a championship is only a very fleeting moment. The enjoyment is the process of getting there. And you can't always measure success by how high you finish or how much money you have. The only way you can measure your success is how you feel about yourself.
Pat Riley had a 9-year NBA playing career. Coming off the bench, he had to support his teammates, and he has brought that emphasis on team play to his coaching.
I think Riley's biggest asset as a coach is his ability to relate to us Riley, by being an ex-player, can relate to the frustrations and the houses that we have to deal with on the court as well as off the court.
He makes us play as a unit, and that's why Coach Riley plays an important part, because he knows that if we don't play as a unit, all the talent that we have, we can't win.
Riley was faced with a difficult adjustment when his playing career ended. He stayed home, then became a broadcaster, then an assistant coach. Now he's where he wants to be.
I don't think you should ever work just to make a living. You have to live for your work.
Now, we're into the top 2. And at number 2, I'd pick my favorite coach of all time, Greg Popovich, the leader of the Spurs dynasty. In reality, Greg Popovich was given to the keys of a franchise that's not won much when he took over the job. He delivered massively for the Spurs because he won 5 championships and he made the playoffs almost every single year when they were competitive. And throughout the modern era, with his same core of Duncan, Parker, and Manu, he was a man who used his core perfectly. And as a coach, Greg Popovich is one of the best coaches in terms of developing young star players, like Mr. Kawhi Leonard. If you needed a blueprint on a head coach, Greg Popovich is the greatest coach you can look at. Because what he did with those prime Spurs teams, instilling principles of playing the game the right way. That's why Greg Popovich is my favorite coach of all time. Because the way his teams played were always pass first. You get it to the open man. There's no ISOs, there's more working together as a team to get the best possible shot. Now, everyone on the team basically had no egos, basically. Which is why his great 20-year span of making the playoffs was incredible for how long he did it. In fact, I actually pray that the Spurs get the 2nd overall pick this year so Victor Wembanyama can be developed by one of the greatest coaches of all time, and for Popovich it will be quite fun to have another generational talent once again. So you may be wondering who is number 1 on this list. Now, drum roll please. Mr. Phil Jackson. Him being a GM made many people forget how great of a coach he was, okay? Now, the problem is, New York fans, you guys probably hate him because he was a really bad GM for you guys. But the Phil Jackson who coached those great teams in the 90s and 2000s was the greatest coach in NBA history. Did you know in NBA history there's only 3 three-peats ever? The Jordan three-peat twice, and the Kobe and Shaq three-peat in the 2000s. And guess who was part of that as a coach every time it happened? Mr. Phil Jackson. So that itself makes him the GOAT. But in total, he won 11 championships, and he is actually referred to as the Zen Master of coaches. His 11 championships alone makes him the GOAT, but the ability to do a three-peat back-to-back and do it one more time with that Kobe and Shaq duo, which just goes to show he was able to deal with egos. He was able to write the right play at the right time, and he was able to withstand injuries. Because every year there was probably an injury on the team, but he was always able to withstand it and three-peat multiple times. In reality, the only other coach who could really talk to Jackson in terms of the same table is maybe Bill Russell's coach, but the problem is, just like Bill Russell, his rings are from an era where the game was different. Phil Jackson won his rings in the great 90s and the early 2000s. The teams were competitive, the NBA was a massive market, and everything was different, which is why the greatest coach in NBA history will be given to Phil Jackson. God! So yeah guys, that's my list, and let's be honest, if you love Jason Kidd and he's your goal as a coach, because that one beer play he had, it's all your own opinion. So, comment below any discussion points you may have on this topic, because I love reading my comments. And I hope you found the video enjoyable because it was a long ass time to make. And I hope you liked watching it. And have a blessed day. Peace.